The summer of 1944 carried a heaviness unlike any other season in the war. Northern France was a land suspended between destruction and hope, between fields scorched by artillery and small villages cautiously reopening shutters after years of occupation. The roads, those narrow lifelines stretching across the countryside, felt alive with movement. Endless convoys of trucks crawled along them, kicking up dust that hung in the air like a thin veil. Private Samuel Sam Whitaker gripped the steering wheel of his GMC truck, his knuckles pale from the pressure. 22 years old, lean and sharp-eyed, he had never imagined that the most defining moments of his life would unfold not on a battlefield, but on a road. Yet that road, cracked and broken as it was, had become his front line. Sam came from a small town in Ohio where the greatest challenge of his youth had been helping his father repair tractors. He'd grown up hearing stories about courage, stories of brave soldiers charging into danger. He never expected courage to look instead like driving a supply truck for 16 hours straight, with barely enough rest to keep his eyes open. He never expected courage to be so quiet. But in this war, logistics meant survival, and Sam was one of thousands whose hands kept that survival possible. The sun shimmered hot above the convoy. Engines throbbed in unison, forming a thunderous chorus that echoed across the hills. Behind Sam, fuel barrels clanged gently as the truck rattled across uneven terrain. Every barrel was precious. Every kilometre travelled was a victory. Every driver behind every wheel held the fate of entire units. Sam often felt a strange mixture of fear and pride. Fear, because he knew the barrels behind him could ignite if struck by a stray spark. Pride, because without him, tanks at the front line would stall, their engines silent. As the convoy slowed near a small village, Sam saw French civilians stepping out of hiding to watch. They waved timidly, unsure at first, then with more confidence. Life was returning, slowly, painfully. Children stood barefoot on dirt roads, some holding sticks shaped like pretend rifles, others clutching handmade toys. One boy stood alone near a wooden fence, clutching a small carved truck. Sam slowed and offered him a chocolate bar. The boy's face lit up, a miracle of innocence amidst ruin. That moment stayed with Sam long after the convoy resumed moving. He had witnessed too many scenes of despair, burnt houses, abandoned barns, trees shattered by shell fire. Yet the boy's smile reminded him that even in war, humanity could find a way to breathe. But the road ahead was long, and the hardest events were yet to come. That night, Sam wrote in his small notebook, "War doesn't feel like what I imagined. It feels like exhaustion and responsibility. It feels like the world depending on simple people doing simple things without stopping. If I ever make it home, I want to remember the faces of the people here. Maybe remembering will help me understand what all this meant." As he fell asleep in the backseat of his truck, the hum of other engines around him lulled him into a restless dream. In the distance, artillery fire flickered like distant lightning. The war was moving. And Sam, whether he liked it or not, was moving with it. August arrived like a furnace. Heat radiated from the metal dashboards. Sweat soaked into uniforms. Dust stuck to the skin, making every driver feel coated in a gritty second layer of clothing. The pace of operations intensified. Bridges were still unstable, and German rearguard units occasionally sabotaged roads before retreating. The drivers couldn't relax, not even for a minute. Sam's convoy had been assigned a particularly hazardous route through recently liberated territory. Mines might still be buried under soft dirt. Snipers, though rare in these areas, had not disappeared completely. The men drove with alertness sharpened by fatigue. His closest companion in the convoy was Corporal Anthony Ramirez, the driver of the truck behind him. Ramirez had a gift for humour, telling stories in a way that could make even the most exhausted soldier crack a smile. "You know," Ramirez said one morning, leaning out his window during a brief stop, "if my mom saw me right now, she'd say, 'Anthony, mijo, I sent you to fight, not to turn into a dust sculpture.'" Sam laughed, more out of appreciation than amusement. They needed laughter like they needed fuel. But that afternoon the convoy suffered one of its worst moments. The lead truck hit a hidden crater, an old explosion site covered by soft soil. The vehicle lurched violently, tilted, and collapsed sideways with a deafening crash. Supplies spilled across the road. Dust billowed into the air. Sam slammed his brakes, jumped out and sprinted forward. The driver, Callahan, was trapped, his leg pinned and his face pale with pain. "Hang tight," Sam shouted. The men moved with urgency born out of instinct, using jacks, metal rods and sheer muscle to lift the damaged truck just enough to free Callahan. When they finally pulled him out, he gripped Sam's sleeve, trembling. "You saved my life," he whispered. Sam shook his head. "We saved each other. That's what we do." But the delay had consequences. The convoy couldn't proceed until they cleared the road. They worked under the blazing sun for 2 hours, shoveling dirt, moving debris, and pushing damaged crates aside. Once they reached a hillside clearing, an officer ordered them to rest briefly. Sam sat in the shade of his truck, wiping sweat from his brow. Ramirez approached, holding 2 tin cups of water. "You look terrible," he joked. Sam smirked. "You're not exactly a postcard yourself." The light-hearted exchange helped, but Sam noticed something else. Ramirez was breathing harder than usual. Everyone was feeling the strain. Their bodies were being pushed far beyond what they had been trained for. Night brought fog and silence. Driving under shielded headlights was like moving through a dream. Trees loomed like dark figures. Shadows danced along the roadside. Every sound felt magnified. The ticking of the engine, the crunch of gravel, the whisper of the wind. Around midnight, Sam nearly drifted asleep behind the wheel. He felt the truck veering and jolted himself awake. Ramirez honked softly behind him, a friendly reminder. Sam pulled over, stepping out into the cold air. He forced himself to breathe deeply to stay grounded. The stars above were faint, obscured by mist. As he stood there, he heard distant rumbling. Thunder? Artillery? The lines between the two sounds had blurred so much that Sam could hardly tell anymore. The next morning brought unsettling news. A German counterattack was forming. Supply lines were threatened. Command demanded maximum efficiency. Even a few hours' delay could cost the front precious momentum. Sam realized then how fragile victory was, not just on the battlefield, but through the invisible work done behind it. The trucks were more than machines, they were the arteries of the Allied advance. He climbed back into his seat, muscles aching, hands trembling lightly, but he drove. He had to. The road did not care that he was tired. The war did not care that he was afraid. And the soldiers at the front needed fuel. He kept going. September rolled in with a mixture of optimism and dread. Optimism because Paris had been liberated and Allied forces were pushing quickly toward the German border. Dread because the success stretched supply lines dangerously thin. Every hour mattered. Every litre of fuel mattered. Every driver mattered. Sam's convoy now operated under a system of near-constant movement. Drivers took shifts resting in the seat, their heads leaning against rattling windows. They ate from ration tins while the trucks rumbled on. They slept in short bursts, often waking up disoriented, unsure if it was day or night. Sam felt himself fading. His hands trembled from overuse. His vision sometimes blurred at the edges. But no one talked about the exhaustion. They simply endured it. One night, while navigating through a dense patch of fog, Sam felt his consciousness slipping again. He jerked awake twice, but the third time was too close. His truck began drifting toward a ditch. Ramirez honked, startling him back to awareness. Sam pulled over abruptly, climbing out to breathe the cold air. The fog was so thick it felt like a wall of white. He leaned heavily on the truck's hood, his body trembling with fatigue he could no longer hide. He closed his eyes and imagined home. Ohio's quiet fields, the smell of fresh-cut hay, his father's reassuring voice. He wanted to be there. He wanted rest. But then another image came. Infantrymen relying on him, tanks near the front line waiting for fuel, medics waiting for supplies. If he stopped, they suffered. He forced himself back into the truck. Fog drifted across the road like pale ghosts. When he slowed near a curve, shadows appeared. Civilian refugees moving through the night, families clutching their belongings, children wrapped in blankets. They had nowhere else to go. Sam rolled down his window. "Where are you heading?" A weary man responded, "Away, as far as possible." Sam wished he could take them. He wished he could give more, but all he could offer was water, rations, and gentle words. They thanked him with tired eyes. He drove on, carrying their faces with him. Days later, the convoy received a critical order. Deliver every drop of fuel to forward units preparing for a decisive push. No delays, no detours, no errors. Sam felt the weight more than ever. The convoy rolled at dawn. Engines roared like a river. The trucks moved in a long, determined column. Dust rose behind them like a cloud of purpose. Hours later, static crackled through the radio. Panic, warnings, sudden chaos. "Enemy artillery, take cover." Sam's heart lurched. He swung his truck off the road, tires bouncing over dirt. Other vehicles scattered around him. A distant explosion rolled across a field, but the shells fell short, causing no harm. The convoy regrouped with admirable discipline. They delivered the fuel. The tanks at the front roared to life, surging ahead. The operation was a success. That evening, Sam parked his truck beside a shallow ridge. The sky blazed orange with sunset. Ramirez joined him quietly. "You know," Ramirez murmured, "one day the world will learn how this war was really won." Sam exhaled, exhausted but proud. "With tired hands and long roads," he replied. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like someone who had simply kept moving forward when it mattered most. Historians would later write that logistics, more than any single battle, won the war. Thousands of drivers like Sam would never be mentioned by name, yet their contribution shaped the outcome more than they ever realized. Sam stood watching the last rays of daylight fade into dusk. The war wasn't over yet, but he had found something inside himself. Courage. Quiet and steady. The long road still stretched ahead, but Sam was no longer afraid of its shadows.